Hi, everybody. This is Kevin Naughton. I'm with PrintCom. Today, I'm joined by Lizzie Egan. She's a Senior Research Analyst at Mintel Comperemedia. Little background on why we're doing today's session. I came across this fascinating article she had written a few weeks back that dealt with how insurance companies are having to address consumer trust issues in their marketing efforts. And it got me thinking. There's actually several industries where maybe the same kind of conditions exist, where because of bad experiences, there's trust issues that have to be overcome. I'm thinking like financial services, like remodeling companies, auto service, and like cable TV providers or satellite TV providers, to name a few. So her specialty is in insurance, but she also has a broad background in marketing. And in her role, she takes this deep, cross-sector industry knowledge and combines it with a competitive marketing analysis, consumer research, and consumer trends to build out, timely, meaningful stories that have some actionable insights. And I don't think it's fluffery to say that. Their stuff is really solid. So let's kind of get into the questions here. Lizzie, how are insurers building trust, with consumers through their marketing?
Yeah, and so I think, first off, thank you for the introduction. I'm happy to be here talking to you today. And I think in terms of how they are building trust with their customers through marketing, they're doing so in a number of ways. But first we have to, I guess, back up a little bit and see, why is trust such a big issue? And so at Mintel, every single year, we're tasked with identifying 4 trends to keep a pulse on for the insurance industry as a whole. And this year for 2020, we identified that trust and transparency were going to be more important than ever before. And this was identified way before COVID-19 was even in the picture. And one of the big reasons why we identified trust and transparency being so important is because a survey from Mintel from about a year and a half ago found that when consumers were asked about trusting the industry as a whole, only 4% of consumers thought that the insurance industry was the most trustworthy part of financial services overall, compared to entities like banks and credit unions. So unfortunately, the insurance space is widely not trusted. And according to a more recent survey from J.D. Power, they just recently released their 2020 auto insurance survey. They found a very strong correlation between scores for trust and those for overall satisfaction. So, if insurers are able to bridge this gap with trust, they might ultimately be forming some more loyal customer bases in the long term.
Okay. So let's kind of look at this from a consumer segment perspective. How do different segments differ on, trust and transparency, with respect to insurance companies?
So yeah, on a macro perspective, I think Mintel has found, and many other outside research agencies have found, that younger generations do have a greater affinity for brand ethics. But I think we also need to keep in mind that the older generations do have more experience with financial institutions like insurance company. And at Mintel, we found that as a population ages, the general trust levels in institutions like financial services may decline. From an insurance perspective, this makes sense. Older consumers have experienced rate increases throughout their lifetime. They may have had a couple of claims that went in a much more frustrating way than they would have liked. So younger consumers are more price-driven. They have less experience, and while they may be driving institutional change, we have to realize that trust is not a generational issue. It spans generations, which is why insurance companies do need to address it sooner rather than later.
Okay, that's interesting. So let's kind of get into some strategy, tactic type stuff. Do you have some examples of direct marketing strategies or tactics that the insurance companies are using to try to, establish or build consumer trust?
For sure. I think there's about like 2 or 3 major trends that I would want to call out. One of them really has to do with simplicity. I think you and I can agree, or many can agree, that insurance is notoriously difficult to understand. Policies aren't necessarily set up to be that intuitive. And so insurance startups or insurtechs have really emerged on the scene in the last several years, promising an easier way of doing things, a more streamlined customer experience. And so in direct marketing from companies like Root, Ladder, Clover Health, Lemonade, these are all startup brands. It's made apparent throughout their direct marketing campaigns that quoting their overall policies and overall savings initiatives have been made simple and easier to understand. But simplicity, I don't think, is necessarily new. Geico and Progressive became household names because they promised a simpler way to achieve savings. It's just that these insurtech brands are different. And customers may have had a bad experience with a legacy insurer like Geico or Progressive. And so when these disruptors like Root and Ladder, like I just said, come and try to offer their services, and they do so in a different way by just continually to underscore that the customer experience is simpler, that's attractive to people who may be a little bit more disgruntled with the industry. And I think something that goes hand in hand with simplicity is this concept of jargon. You know, like I said, insurance policies, they're not necessarily made to be easy to understand. Even being in the industry, can get mixed up from deductibles to all of the different coverages that I need for an auto insurance policy. And so some companies are trying to acknowledge that as a whole and eliminate jargon. And we see this a lot from the health insurance perspective, that at the start of a year, health insurance companies may send a direct mailer to their customers and lay out all of the policy details in a simple, easy to understand way. Highmark is a member of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association, and they even in a direct mailer stopped for a second and said, "Woo, that was a lot to digest. How are you feeling?" Which this isn't a direct mailer, so you know, in a sense, it humanizes the message a little bit. But some companies will message or mention jargon more point blank. Plymouth Rock, which is a smaller P&C insurer on the East Coast, mentioned in a direct mailer that jargon is not their style. So, you know, a more direct way of doing things, doing that by underscoring simplicity, but really just eliminating the jargon that could come with insurance. But another trend, I guess, that goes away from simplicity has to do with just mentioning trust point blank, which a little bit goes hand in hand with what Plymouth Rock was doing. But many insurers in their direct marketing campaigns will say they are a company that can be trusted, especially in cross-sell offers. You know, we've seen from Geico that they'll say, you already trust us for auto insurance. Why not sign up for renter's insurance? You already have a relationship with us. So if everybody's using this concept, this word trust in their mailers, does it kind of dilute the message in a little bit? And in my opinion, it kind of does if everyone's saying it. But Mutual of Omaha this year, we observed a new mailer from them where they mentioned that honesty is at the core of their brand. And so while the underline or like the overall theme is pretty similar, honesty, I think, kind of freshens up the terminology a little bit in their direct mailer. So, you know, we're seeing a balance of companies being subtle, but also very point blank about why they should be trusted.
That's interesting. So kind of the implication, but behind what I hear you saying there is perhaps people feel like they've been either there's been some bait and switch type stuff happening where they thought they had coverage for something and they did not indeed have coverage for it because probably they didn't understand their policy.
Exactly. And I think we ran into that a little bit with COVID-19. Business owners were confused when pandemics were excluded from their business interruption policies. And I think there is a knowledge gap that's not unique to business owners and it's not unique to consumers. And we're seeing companies just trying to underscore that these things are confusing, but we're going to try to make it better. And this is visible in direct marketing. This is visible on digital marketing.
Yeah. So I don't think I mentioned this at the outset, but just a little more on Lizzie's background. Her company looks at literally thousands of direct mail pieces and direct marketing touches annually just to analyze what people are doing, trends, tactics, what works, what doesn't work. So when she starts talking about things she's seeing, they're seeing a lot. And she worked in the insurance industry before getting into this analyst role. Okay, another question here. How are insurance companies using data and technology to craft the messaging to build that trust?
Definitely. And that's totally like a loaded question, because insurance companies have been innovating up the wazoo in recent years and finding ways to simplify the process. And I think at the end of the day, it really just rolls up in trying to make it simpler. They're trying to make insurance less complicated, essentially trying to start from scratch. And so first, when it comes to the quoting process, we've seen this emergence of accelerated underwriting, which is essentially automating that rating, the rating process. And so it's being used by insurtechs and legacy insurers to put people into groups and use AI to quickly rate their risk and assign them a policy price accordingly. And so when they're able to automate those risk algorithms, for lack of a better term, they're able to quickly deliver a quote and people are able to get a policy faster. So take life insurance, for example. It's been notoriously difficult to get a life insurance policy. You may need to get a medical exam, and that's going to require you to jump through a couple of hoops in order to get it. And so accelerated underwriting is hoping to eliminate the need for a medical exam in all cases. Customers are pretty frustrated by these like lengthy and difficult to understand quoting processes and experiences. And so at the end of the day, accelerated underwriting is trying to fix that. Another part of the customer experience that I think is a big friction point is the claims experience. And so
Right.
claims, they are often also lengthy and difficult to understand. And at the end of the day, some of those claims decisions might result in more confusion than was necessary that was necessary. And so insurance companies have introduced, what'd you say?
I'm sure nobody watching today's ever had a bad experience with an insurance claim.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure. And so, yeah, insurance companies have been trying to introduce mobile claims where people can take a picture with their smartphone of a fender bender and not have to go through an inspection process, because that can all be done virtually. They just can take their car into the shop afterwards. And insurance companies are also partnering with third-party tech companies and data providers to try to optimize that whole experience. But it seems like for the most part, their insurance companies are just at that point of trying to lengthen or shorten the amount of time that it takes to file a claim and settle a claim. It doesn't seem like they've yet softened the experience of understanding why a claim is what it is. It seems like they're just in those initial steps. So more work to be done, and more work that I'm excited to look out for. And then I guess like the last thing that we're seeing from a privacy and trust perspective is telematics and usage-based insurance. And so this is in property and casualty primarily, and it's involves these products that can give you an insurance rate based on how well you are driving or how much you are driving. And so this requires customers to provide some more of their data for their insurance company to track them. And that might seem a little counterintuitive. If you're providing more data to your insurance company, wouldn't that negate the whole trust factor? But some customers might see it as having some more transparency into why their rate is what it is at the end of the day. And I think there's just different trade-offs and different strokes for different folks. So, yeah.
So, but they're portraying that as a consumer benefit somehow.
Definitely. With telematics and usage-based insurance, if you drive better, you're ultimately getting a lower price. You can get discounts based on how well you're driving. And usage-based policies, those are great for people who live in cities who might not be driving as much as somebody who lives in the suburbs. Maybe they're only driving their car a couple miles a week, so they can only pay a price based on the miles that they're actually driving. So that level of transparency and understanding of how their policy works is a great way to build some relationships with customers.
And potentially a path can be shown how they could improve their rate through different behavior down the pike.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it's going to be interesting to see if these telematics programs are going to evolve into more advanced rating systems as a whole for the insurance industry. But right now it's really being framed as a way to improve and reward driving and give customers some much needed financial relief that they've been looking for.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is fascinating. Anybody knows me, I can I start getting curious and I can ask questions forever, but probably everybody's time's limited. We're going to share some contact info here on the next slide. If you want to get a hold of us at PrintCom and talk about how potentially we could help you address these issues in your business, the web address, email address, and phone number are going to be on that last slide. Lizzie, what do you want to suggest for people who might want to get a hold of Mintel Comperemedia?
Yes, so we on this slide that will be following the presentation will provide some website information so that you could inquire about talking to somebody from Mintel Comperemedia more about the direct marketing that we're observing. But I'll also leave my contact information in case you want to open up a conversation about insurance.
Yeah, okay. And I know this is kind of unscripted, but I'm like real big on application. So, key takeaways, I would say think real hard about, are there obstacles or impediments in the mind of the consumers that are keeping them from thinking about using you? And if there are, craft a strategy that isn't just marketing speak, but like product operational stuff that addresses that.
Yeah, it's all about the customer experience at the end of the day. I think when we saw with what we saw with companies like Amazon that obviously sharpened up the customer experience also for all sorts of different industries. At the end of the day, insurance isn't much different. It has to really boil down to a solid, streamlined customer experience.
Right. Well, thanks a lot, Lizzie. This has been awesome. Take care, everybody. Thanks
Thank you so
for
much.
watching. Yep.